Strong winds and heavy rain hammered Charleston on Tuesday. I take a look back at that weather with Charleston weather's Jared Smith for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Jared Smith, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey, thanks, Quintin. Good to be back.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, you are the founder of Charleston Weather. And needless to say, you provide daily weather forecasts for the Low Country and beyond. From Tuesday to right now, what is that weather headline to describe the Low Country?
Well, unsettled, I think is a good way to put it. Tuesday was maybe it's underselling it a little bit. Tuesday was remarkable in many ways. The wind fields were as strong as we'll see outside of a tropical cyclone down here. And we saw that too. We saw the gusts, 69 miles an hour at the airport, numerous 60-mile-an-hour gusts just across the metro area. We were very fortunate not to have any tornadoes. We had the bridges go into code red for a time because the winds were so bad, and we saw the tractor trailer flipped over on the Ravenel. I had actually the night before we had done a Carolina Weather Group special, and I was actually thinking, I was like, okay, we're probably going to see a couple tractor trailers flip over, and so I should have taken the under, but on the two, but yeah, it was a force to be reckoned with, and I think the good news is that we get a couple days off basically, and then we're gonna get into Friday. Friday's not going to be as bad. I think that's the most important thing. Friday's not going to be as bad. There is still the potential for a few stronger storms, but it looks like we're not going to be able to get as much of that wind down. It's still going to be breezy. It's still going to be gusty at times, but it does not look as bad as Tuesday did. Tuesday is going to stand out kind of uniquely this year, I think.
And so where exactly did this particular, storm originated from?
Yeah, so, it came down, we were watching it for days as it was making the trek, the piece of energy that was going to help spawn it was making the trek down from British Columbia, down through Washington State, into the western half of the U.S., dug down around the Four Corners, and then over Amarillo, it started to spin up a surface low. And that surface low was basically what helped, kick up the cold front and kick up, all that severe weather. And then just this massive storm at that point. The upper low would deepen. The surface low was basically bombing out, which means the pressure was dropping very rapidly as it was moving across the Great Lakes. We were nowhere near the low pressure system, by the way, but just the sheer expanse of it, and the gradient between the high pressure that was shoved out of the way to the northeast helped kick up those winds. And then when you have that huge, when you have that big trough coming in, that big upper low kind of digging in there, and what that caused, is this huge surge of moisture. To the point where, one of my coworkers in Toronto was actually telling me that his wife's daffodils were blooming because of that. That's how much warm air had been transported north with the storm. So Toronto, Canada is not a place that you expect flowers to be blooming in January.
Right.
So, just to kind of put it that way, but there was, this huge response to this, surging a ton of moisture northward, ton of warm and moist air northward, and that's how you get, that squall line. You get that squall line kicking up. There were some discrete supercells ahead of the line that fortunately were just to the east of Charleston, which was good. We don't like those at all. And then, that thing just swept right through. Wow. Just took a trek across the U.S. and it was affecting everybody. The eastern half of the U.S., it was a very sprawling storm system.
Wow. So before that storm actually came to Charleston, Jared, how many supercells were actually in the system in the air?
Well, so they had there was a small tornado issue overnight. Mobile, Alabama, near Tallahassee. There were tornadoes in Panama City Beach that touched down. So you had and a couple of those were supercell thunderstorms that were ahead of the main line. And the reason why we don't like those supercell thunderstorms is that they're not competing. Is that with a line, it's technically just much more. I was about to say a line is much more linear, but that is kind of the way. It's much more of a linear wind threat. You can get some kinks along the head of the line, and you can get some brief tornadoes, that can do some, decent damage. But when you get the supercells going, those are in a little less competition with each other. And so it kind of creates, I don't know, I don't want to necessarily say it creates its own environment, but it is much, it is isolated, it is discrete, as the name implies. And so when you get those, that's where you get some of your really strong tornadoes. And that was a concern for Tuesday. Thankfully did not materialize here. We actually saw kind of I like to call it the conga line of supercells. We actually saw it off the coast. And there was a twin touchdown in Carteret County, North Carolina, believe it or not. Two tornadoes came on shore at the same time. One of them was an EF1, one of them was an EF0. Caused a little bit of damage. Nobody was hurt, but just give you a general idea of what that was like. And that was ahead of that main squall line.
Whoa. So, and let's not forget about Bamberg as well.
Oh, goodness. I mean, I'll tell you, Bamberg, that was just tragic. I mean, just tragic. That downtown is beautiful.
Yes.
Downtown Bamberg is beautiful. It is fun to drive through. It's just like, it's such a nice, like, transport away from, hustle, bustle, lots of, new construction and things like that. It is just a really nice place to stop. People are nice. It's a good town. Yeah. And to see what happened there, that was a 100-year-old building. I mean, that was not, in that the city hall that collapsed in that tornado. I mean, that was absolutely terrifying. And then the video today, that was shared out by the South Carolina Emergency Management Division, showing how very close a few cars were to taking all of those bricks. There were people driving on, they were driving on 78 at that time. And is it 61 or 78 through there? I can't remember. Sometimes I go back roads to Atlanta when I go to Atlanta. So that's we go through Bamberg, and I mean there were cars on the road, and I mean just lickety split. Like all of a sudden you have these the bricks flying everywhere, and you couldn't see it. I mean it was very rain wrapped. That was the other thing too, and that's what we commonly get down here. Tornadoes here are very difficult to see. They're usually in sheets of rain. They don't look like the ones in the plains. That's just the nature of the beast down here. It's just so much more humid here. We're going to have higher precipitation storms. So, but yeah, my thoughts are with everybody in Bamberg. That was really tough to see. It's a beautiful town and just really tough to see.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Reminds me of Georgetown. How many rain-wrapped tornadoes did occur on Tuesday overall?
So we had a few. The good news is in the Low Country though we didn't have any. There was nothing confirmed in the Low Country part of South Carolina, which is good news. Yes. We did not. We did have. There was the Bamberg tornado, which was confirmed as an EF2 with 125 mile an hour estimated winds from the damage pattern that was assessed by the Weather Service in Columbia. And there was also another tornado that spun up over Lake Murray that came ashore in Chapin, and that was an EF1. So we had a couple there. There was a tornado in North Carolina, in Claremont, North Carolina, that unfortunately claimed a life, as well as the tornadoes I was speaking about earlier in Carteret County. Right. We got lucky. We had a couple storms that were trying to start to spin as they got here, but it wasn't really. They weren't really able to sustain it, which was good. I think we got saved a little bit by some of that heavier rain that we had in advance of that squall line. That may have done just enough to stabilize things, just enough to keep some of the spin from making it too far down to the surface.
Wow. So let me ask you this: as far as tracking the rain from Tuesday, what was actually observed?
So rainfall on Tuesday, honestly, I mean, it was not very, it was not a big rain event. It was not like December 17th where we had places getting 13 to 16 inches of rain in a day. It was nothing like that. It moved fairly quickly. I had, in my own gauge, my storm total was a little over an inch of rain, and that was pretty common. Yes. Again, when you have that squall line that came through, they're big drops for sure, but it was not, but it was not a huge volume event for rain. 1 to 2 inches was pretty common.
Wow. Wow. And so, what is the average rain for January? I know that's a simplistic question.
That's a great question. January can tend to be, one of the, it can be a stormy month. I mean, winter's here, and January also is acting like, it very much acts like our, how do I put it? It's very much our transitional month,
Right.
because our fall really, if you think about it, goes through December. And then January is when we really start to get into that. Well, this is delayed a little bit. We're having a very kind of like fall-like severe weather episode now. We're going to get into the cold next week. Right. But right now, like, normally, we're running a little bit. Normally we're running about let's see, about an inch or so by now, since January 1st. So we're actually, it looks like we're actually a little bit above that. So last year was much drier. So we've already had 1.8 inches of rain this year. Last year we had only had maybe 0.3. So so it's certainly been a little bit wetter this go around, but we can tend to have some fairly stormy times in January.
Wow. And how many more times do you anticipate it being stormier here in January?
Well, we definitely have one on Friday. That's going to be coming through, and again, that's that has it comes with the severe weather risk. Again, it doesn't look as bad as Tuesday. I think that Tuesday was on the kind of the higher end of what we would see here outside of a tropical cyclone. I think storm that we're dealing with on Friday is going to be a little bit more normal to us. We may have some sporadic pockets of damaging wind in some spots. We may have, there is a slight risk for a tornado or two, but that doesn't look to be a big, that's not going to be a big part of it. Fewer people are going to experience severe weather on Friday than they did on Tuesday. And then we have one more cold front that's going to come through on Martin Luther King Day and into Tuesday. And then after that, we're going to chill out. Looks like we're going to have a few dry days, and we're going to chill out real bad. If Tuesday's high does not look to get too far above 50, if it gets that high at all, which I know you love, and we may be starting Wednesday in the 20s across much of the metro area. So we're going to get some winter here pretty soon. Much of the country is going to go below normal over the next few days.
I'm going ahead of myself, Jared, and everybody knows I hate the cold weather like it is cold right now. But let me ask you this: when do you see a warm up for us here in the Low Country?
It's been interesting. Over the last several years, we've had a good warm up, and we've had warm ups in February. We've had a pretty good run of false springs in February.
Yes.
Now with the storm track the way it is, we'll see if that ultimately plays out. The outlook is generally for warmer than normal temperatures. When you look seasonally, seasonal outlooks don't tell you exactly what's going to happen. It's just kind of you take a general look at the pattern, and you're kind of thinking, okay, this is probably how this is going to work out. Historically, we've had very warm Februaries. It is an El Nino year. Things can go a little bit differently in that respect, but overall, El Nino tends to favor a warmer and stormier winter here.
Ooh.
So you take the good with the bad, right? And so that's what I'm thinking is it looks like, if I had to guess, we're probably going to have, we're going to have our fits of cold. I mean, we're about to get into one. But it's going to be kind of up, it's going to be kind of up and down. We don't stay in the deep cold here over winters, especially in the last few years. That's just not something that happens really much anymore in the recent scheme of things.
Wow, that's good. That's really good. And going back, obviously, to Tuesday, Jared, I wanted to ask you, what was that wind field like prior to it coming to the Low Country?
Yeah, so again, that wind field was, it was exceptional. I mean, it was well beyond, just what we normally see. So, for example, we take weather balloon observations, every 12 hours. They sent a special one up. And it was measuring like 80 mile an hour winds at like 3,000 feet. So one, very not fun if you're flying. And I know that there were a lot of ground stops. I actually had friends in transit, on Tuesday. They were trying to fly out of here, and they were having all sorts of fits getting out of here. But the wind field, but again, when you're dealing with, I think the best way to illustrate the wind field was just by looking up on Tuesday and watching the clouds.
Oh, yes.
Those clouds were moving. Those clouds were getting a move on, and you could see them also going in different directions. So that also was able to kind of show you the wind shear, the change in direction and height, speed and direction with height is the shear, and we had a lot of that. One of the tools that I use to look at those vertical profiles is a tool called BuffKit. And when I was looking at the BuffKit output for Tuesday a few days ago, the thing that really kind of like set my alarm bells off was the fact that the graph that was showing basically the amount of shear and the amount of curvature to the wind field. I had to zoom out several times in order to get the whole thing on because there was just so much energy available. There was so much wind energy available. That it literally went off the plot. So yeah, it don't see that here very often.
Yes.
And so that was one of the things that really caught everybody's eye, and then the consistency in there.
Oh, yes.
Is what caught everybody's eye. And honestly, the thing is though, it could have been so much worse. That's the thing. It's like we could have gotten so much more of those winds down to the surface. I was really concerned that we were going to have a longer period of non-thunderstorm winds gusting 50, 60 miles an hour. That didn't end up happening. We really only got into those really high gusts, within an hour or so of the squall line coming through. Wow. I was very concerned that we were going to have widespread power outages ahead of that line when the most severe weather would happen. That didn't really pan out, and I'm very happy about that. We certainly had gusts 40, 45 miles an hour pretty continuously for much of the day, and that is unusual. To get that many. But I think the good news is that we didn't get into the really extreme stuff. 50, 60. When you're talking winds that you typically associate with tropical cyclones. I mean, Idalia did not get that windy here.
Right.
So to give you a general idea of just how impactful this was. So. Like I said, I'm used to seeing these kinds of wind speeds around here, but in a tropical cyclone, in the miles of a tropical cyclone, and so to have something like that with the magnitude that we had, with the intensity there, that was pretty rare. That was not, that was definitely highly anomalous for this point, this part of the world.
And those thunderstorms were not that consistent at all.
No, and again, the other thing too is that Tuesday we were kind of wondering, how unstable were we going to get?
Right.
That is always the question in the cool season. How unstable are we going to get? We deal with shelf waters that are in the mid to upper 50s. That will run. The air temperatures over land were 70 by about 11 o'clock in the morning, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. But still, if you go over the water, that's going to be that's going to necessarily go down, and those surface temperatures over the water can offset the amount of instability that can develop, especially near the coast. That's why we're so used to seeing squall lines fall apart as they get towards the coast, is that they're going to run out of that. They're going to run into some more stable, they're going to run into a layer of stable air that's going to disrupt them a little bit. Now, the wind fields and the amount of moisture being ejected northward kind of rendered that mood a little bit this go around. There are certain things that that just get overcome, and the shelf waters. I'm sure they played a little bit of a part in keeping some of that more acute tornado risk down here, but they didn't really make a difference. It's just that the strength of the wind fields was able to overpower whatever knock down on the instability that we got. So it was always a question. Whether we were going to see, some of that. It was kind of interesting too, because we had the most thunder and lightning, actually the most, electrical discharge ahead of the main line.
Right.
We had some people amongst Corn actually tell me that the main line itself was actually not too bad. The winds actually came down, and that actually can happen. You exhausted some of the instability, you've exhausted some of the mixing, you're not mixing down some of the stronger gusts. And so we actually had some people say that the squall line was actually the calmest part of the day, which is kind of wild. But then it ramped back up, as we know, and as was expected, it ramped back up as it made its trek towards the coast, because we had the longest time to destabilize.
Wow. And the last question for you, Jared, is this: where were the wind gusts the highest in the Low Country?
So the wind gusts were very high, actually, right around the Charleston metro. Honestly, in the Charleston metro, heading up towards Myrtle Beach. I mean, that's where we had, it was pretty uniform. Honestly, I looked at a map from the Weather Service. They do a data analysis after every event, and it was pretty uniform. I will say that. The gusts were pretty consistent. You could find 60-mile-an-hour gusts from Savannah up to Beaufort up to Charleston. So it was pretty uniform, especially near the coast. So the coastal areas definitely took the brunt. But in North Carolina, with those twin tornadoes that I mentioned earlier, a weather station measured a 102-mile-an-hour wind gust.
Whoa!
It was a weather flow station, actually,
right.
One of Shea's, one of Shea Gibson's, it clocked 102 miles an hour associated with a tornado that was coming ashore at Carteret County while it was still a waterspout. So, as crazy as it sounds, it could have been worse. Yeah. They got well into the 60, 70 mile an hour range in eastern North Carolina, where they had even more time to destabilize. So that's typically what happens with the geography the way it is. Eastern North Carolina has just generally more time, more land to work with, and so it's almost like a mini tornado alley between Raleigh and the Outer Banks. So,
yes.
Yeah, it was quite a day. That's for sure.
That's for sure. And the timeline for Friday's weather, when do we expect the severe weather to potentially come in?
Yeah, if there's going to be severe weather on Friday, it's going to happen, generally mid-late afternoon into the early evening hours, it looks like. We're going to have a warm front come through in the morning, and the timing on that is still a little suspect, but there's going to be a lot of showers associated with that warm front. And what I think is going to happen is that we're going to keep a lot of that precipitation around for much of the day. So that's going to keep that instability tamped down a little bit. However, there is going to be a period ahead of the system's cold front where there's going to be another surge of moisture, maybe another surge of instability, and that's where we're going to have to watch for maybe the potential for some damaging straight line winds. A broken line of thunderstorms could develop and move eastward, but we're not. But again, it's nowhere near the flashing red alarm bell signals that we were seeing with Tuesday's event.
Wow! And so is it possible for me to sit outside tomorrow at 10:45 a.m. maybe?
I don't know about that. You're probably going to get rained on, and it's going to be gusty too. I think the other thing too that you keep in mind, that warm front's going to lift north, and it's going to, and we're going to be gusty again, 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts. I mean, that's still tough. That's still tough for driving on bridges. That's still tough for doing a lot of things outdoors. So that's certainly something that we're going to want to watch. But that being said, I think it's not going to rise to that extreme level. Everyone is very spooked about Tuesday, and I get it. I get it. I was a little spooked too, and so they hear, "Oh God, not again on Friday." But it's not really going to be again per se. I think that's the most important thing. Many of us will probably just come through and be like, "Oh, Friday was just a little wind, a little rain," and that was it. And they'll be like, "Oh, what were you weather guys talking about?" And it's like, even though we've been telling people for days that this is not going to be as bad, so that's usually how it works out, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't know about you doing an interview outside at 10:45 a.m. So
okay, I'm going through that.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you for all your hard work here in the Low Country, as always. Jared Smith for Charleston Weather. Thank you for your time, and again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. Great to be here, and hope to talk real soon under happier circumstances.
Absolutely.